Hi everyone, it's Mental Health Week. So I wanted to say something about Mental Health Week. So my name is Antonella Zottler, for those who don't know me. And I've had my own experience of mental health issues. I think we all have. I think at one point in our lives, everybody is going to feel and end up with some kind of depression and anxiety, especially in the world that we live in and all the complicated things in it, the adversities, the oppression in it. So I want to start with kind of like a paragraph and a big quote by one of my greatest legends, which is Gabor Mate. And for those of you who don't know Gabor Mate, he is a retired physician who worked with people with addiction. So his area is in addiction, his area is in trauma, and especially childhood trauma as well, and things like ADHD. So he's very much in those kind of areas. And a lot of what he says really resonates with me. And a lot of what he says is a lot of my own values and a lot of things that I totally agree with, or I might have said. So I just want to read something from him because he eloquently puts it, and I like the way he puts it. So I think normality is a myth. The idea that some people have pathology and the rest of us are normal is crude. There's nothing about any mental ill person, and it doesn't matter what the diagnosis is, that I couldn't recognize in myself. The reality is that in every case, mental illness is an outcome of traumatic events. And by trauma, I don't mean dramatic events. There's a difference. Fundamentally, it has to do with whether human needs are being met or not. Since we live in a society that largely denies human developmental needs, doesn't even understand them, let alone provide for them, you're going to have a lot of people affected in adverse ways. Most of the population, in fact. And so then to separate out those who meet the particular criteria for a particular diagnosis from the rest of us is utterly unscientific and unhelpful. More to the point, you need to look at what it is about our society that generates what we call abnormality. Okay, so having studied trauma myself and having had trauma, I am very familiar as well with how many times people can get misdiagnosed and how many times people are seen as objects or the root of they're seen as the symptoms, but not the root of the cause. And a lot of the times, the question that we should be asking, and I think Ava Longden said this as well in one of her TED Talks, questions that in psychiatry, especially, we should be asking is not what's wrong with you, but what's happened to you. And what happens to you is a question that is hardly ever asked. People are just labeled, misdiagnosed. A lot of the diagnoses given are so easily to misinterpret because there's so many similarities. And so then people are kind of left alone with that pain and that suffering. And a lot of the times, all these things that are labeled as mental illnesses are actually trauma responses. And we live in a society and in a world that lacks that information, lacks that trauma information. And there are talks being made now about trauma and that information given, which is really a good process. The conversation really needs to keep going. So that is a struggle in itself, where people that have had traumas and people that have had a lot of suffering and pain and adversity in their lives are then kind of just labeled or medicated. And whilst some medication really helps people, which is great, it's not always helpful and it's not the only solution. So it needs to be, I think it needs to be, if it can be, temporarily, but it also needs to be more than just medication, more than just the symptoms being looked at and nothing else as a root cause. So it's not shaming anyone at all by any means. It's actually shaming the pharmaceuticals that might take advantage of people by easily giving out medication to people who might not need it necessarily neither, and not finding other ways. Like I said, I do understand that some people do need their medication, and it has helped them. The other thing I wanted to say is that when it comes to mental health, we're seeing it in society always about, you know, if you're depressed, speak out, reach out, which is fair enough, but it's really difficult to reach out. We're living in a society where people are very judgmental, and there are still stigmas around about mental illness. So people don't want to talk until they feel safe, and they need to feel that they're with safe people, but also in a safe environment and society that doesn't stigmatize. And like we've seen in Gabor Mate's quote, we live in a society that largely denies human developmental needs to begin with. There's always sometimes positive toxicity, which means that we're not allowed our feelings. People feel threatened by our feelings. People are triggered by their own pain. And so whether consciously or not, they silence us with things like, oh, it'll get better. Don't worry. What doesn't kill you make you stronger. And these are totally, whilst that person may think it's helpful, they're totally unhelpful to the person who's suffering, because it completely invalidates what they're feeling and it silences that pain. It's kind of saying like, no, I'm not comfortable with your pain. I can't deal with it. So that is this is why a lot of people don't feel free or safe to speak out, especially as well with suicide and the stigma around that. You still hear people that are judgmental and go, oh, you know, they're selfish. How could they do this to their family? I know only cowards do this. And may I remind you that we're talking about suffering when we're talking about suicide. Now, I think it's selfish. I'm not saying that, you know, nobody wants anyone to die from depression or to die in a way where it's painful or they take their own life. And it's traumatic for the people who are left behind, no doubt. And I would know this because I am a survivor myself of suicide, having lost a parent, and that's been my trauma, one of my traumas as a child. But it's not, but when we think about it, when we're in extreme pain, we want to kill that pain. And suicide is about killing the pain. It's about resources that somebody doesn't have. And if you think of when we have a migraine, a really bad migraine, or we're in really big pain, we have drugs to, you know, if we have a surgery, nobody puts us through that pain. We have medication like drugs like anesthetic given to us, so we don't go through that pain. If we have a toothache, we go and take some kind of paracetamol to numb that pain. So imagine somebody having extreme anguish, extreme mental psychological pain and torment every single day, I don't think anybody would really want our loved ones to be in that kind of pain. So it's really understandable when you look at that to see how somebody would want to kill the pain in the only way they can do. And if that means killing their bodies to get that relief, then so be it. It's not a selfish act. It's not to hurt anybody. And it shouldn't be made about anybody else but that person who is suffering. So we need to kill that shame as well. We need to allow men to have their emotions and feel that it's okay. Being vulnerable is strong. You can be strong and you can be vulnerable. A man is a human being. Human beings have feelings. So we need to kill these gender stereotypes that are so detrimental. You know, that's a society that says men are like this, women are like this, or girls like blue and boys need to like, girls like pink and boys like blue. But in the 1950s, pink was for boys and blue was for girls. So nobody defines anybody but yourself, no matter what society tells you. And the other thing about depression and mental illness is that we're living in a society that tells us we can be anything we want to be, and then it oppresses us in every single way, puts us into a box when we are complex human beings with complex emotions, and these complex emotions are not being understood. The complexity of trauma is not being understood. The oppression that society brings, capitalism, sexism, racism, ableism, transphobia, gay phobia, everything like that. And there is more that I obviously haven't said. All those things, the damage of global warming, all these things that need to change, and we need to look at ourselves too to make that change, is going to lead to mental breakdowns. So it's not a case of there's so many people having depression because it runs in the family and it's genes. And maybe, yes, some people are more vulnerable to it because of genes, but the triggers are all around as well. You cannot heal in an environment that one has caused the trauma, that continues to cause it, or in an environment that is dysfunctional to begin with, and in an environment where we have a traumatized world, where we have traumatized people ruling the world. Everything is traumatized in it. So then the other thing I wanted to say about reaching out, that message is all right, but people do reach out. There are a lot of people reaching out, and there's not enough help out there. There is not enough funding being made by the NHS, and you can argue that the government doesn't have enough money for everybody, but it's the government who's making the poor decision. It's the narcissistic people that are ruling the world as leaders that are causing people to need that support to begin with. So we need to stop voting for those people to begin with. And those people are the people that can't use the money to fund, but they have money when it suits them to find it. And they're the ones creating all the problems by the lack of decisions that they're making, but really bad decisions that they're making, and decisions that are not based on any on any interest of the public, but their own self-interest. So that's another problem. Then on the NHS, it's short sessions, and people really sometimes need long term. Then you have CBT, but the CBT given is helpful for maybe in the thinking pattern, but when you're looking at trauma, which is so complex, you can't think yourself out of trauma. So sometimes that is either not enough and it's ineffective, and we all know that one type of therapy doesn't fit all because we're individuals. Then there's a lot of charities who are struggling, bless them, and they do give support, but a lot of the times it's again limited sessions that they can give. A lot of the times, because they need those fundings, you find yourself as a client getting that support, and your time is being taken by lots of questionnaires that you have to fill in, just so that the charity can show that they're making a difference and get the funding. And you find yourself sometimes feeling like you're being fobbed off, or that nobody cares, or that nobody's really listening, or that your time is being wasted by that. And then you feel like you're back to square one. All these sessions have been so limited, you still need more, and your time is being wasted a lot on filling out these forms as well. So whilst it's helpful and the help is invaluable, there's also these little things that can be really hard for people that are still struggling. Sometimes there's different people on the line, and you don't want to go over the same things because it can be really difficult just to open about things to begin with, and then have to repeat it and repeat it again to someone different because you feel like you're never moving forwards. And it's really painful, almost traumatic, almost re-traumatic in itself to keep doing that. And the other thing I want to say also is, I've had obviously, I'm speaking from experience as somebody who's needed support and help myself, and also as somebody who's gone into the counselling area. You know, there is a lot of counsellors out there who are wanting to help people. There are loads of counsellors out there. But counselling is the most exploited job I have ever encountered. The expenses are extortionate. If you're a working class, it is really, really difficult. It's the only job that you pay, even qualified, to keep yourself having a career, and you can't really call it a career. Some people have been successful in making it a career, so it can happen, but really it's not easy, especially if you're working class and location. You're paying a lot for insurance, you can pay £75 at least for an hour and a half that you need for supervision every month in order to meet the membership criteria for accreditation, which then you need 450 hours. But then once you have accreditation and you paid all this and you've done all this hard work, again, it's not enough, because the BACP, which is the standard membership, even though there's others around, they're wanting you to accredit yourself again after a bit. So it never ends, and there's tons of these money. I've personally had a mental breakdown just because I want to be a counsellor and I don't find myself in a position that's financially secure and well off. And I've seen my bank balance go under and under and under, and to the point where I was nearly bankrupt because of my desire and passion to help people. On top of that, you need training, and training can cost a lot of money. Sometimes you find the odd free ones. If you're renting, obviously you've got those expenses. So there's extortionate expenses all the time, on top of trying to pay your bills. So I believe that counsellors should be given supervision in the job and have help with that. And I believe that they should be paid like doctors are paid and be valued, because the pay that counsellors receive as well is really not a wage that can help you pay bills. Jobs out there, there's lack of jobs out there a lot. That's why a lot of counsellors are forced to go into private practice if they can. So there is loads of counsellors waiting to help all these people in need, but not enough is being done for the clients to have that support, and for counsellors to be able to be counsellors, to be valued, to be able to do the job and find a profession in counselling, and not have to pay to just keep doing what they do after they're qualified for so much that is extortionist. So capitalism there, really, you can see it, like you see it infiltrating in loads of parts of society. So that needs to change, so that counsellors can be available, in schools as well. There's so many jobs out there that are not opened because counsellors are undervalued. And like I said, it's a two-edged sword for counsellors and for the people that need it. And it doesn't have to be that way. There is so much that can be done, so that people that need the help can get it, and that counsellors can be able to do the job that they're passionate about and help people. So that's another thing I wanted to put across. So yeah, I've just given you a few things to think about that we need to change and that need changing in order for things to get better and to support mental illness. And the last thing I'm going to say is something that I think is really important, and again, that our world doesn't value, but it's so healing, and that is empathy. Empathy for self, empathy for others, just empathy in general. We live in a world that is so judgmental. We live in a world that is so superficial. The values that it has really disconnected us from ourselves and who we are and what we need. And trauma and depression is a lot about disconnection as well. Anxiety and everything like that. And about not being able to be our authentic selves, and about the wounds. So with empathy, people don't hurt each other with empathy. We need to stop victim blaming, especially when it's about sexual abuse, any kind of way. We know that sexual abuse doesn't have to be violent. It doesn't have to be physical. It can still be as damaging. And we need to stop. We need to listen to children and believe them when they come out. We need to understand that parents, siblings can sexually abuse someone. Perpetrators can be anyone. We need to know that, it's not just girls that are in trouble. It's also boys that get hurt through sexual abuse. And we need more to believe them. And we need more to believe adults who are groomed. Adults can get groomed just as much as children, and we need to believe the adults as well who experience sexual abuse. We need to stop with the victim blaming. We need to start looking at the language we use around it. Sex with a 6-year-old, no, a 6-year-old, you can't have sex with a 6-year-old, you have raped a 6-year-old. So just changing that terminology, and changing the victim blaming. Recently, in the UK, we've seen Sarah, who was brutally kidnapped, raped and murdered by a policeman. And as shocking as that sounds, and these things are shocking, but most disturbingly, they're also very common. The people that hurt you are either people that are to protect you or the closest people to you. We normally hear us saying to children, or, you know, as adults, believing that it's strangers who harm us. A lot of the time, children are hurt by family, even mothers. Anyone can be an abuser. So it happens, and it happens more than we would like to think. And we just need to be aware of that. And victim blaming, you know, nobody asks for it. It doesn't matter if someone was drunk. It doesn't matter if someone's walking alone. It doesn't matter if someone got into the car. The onus is on the abuser. There is nothing that somebody does that invites sexual abuse or sexual violence. Nothing. So we need to stop victim blaming. Domestic violence as well, we need to stop victim blaming. The question isn't, why doesn't somebody leave? The question is, why don't we as society fight more for people to have these rights and for laws and for things to be put in place? The victim is not responsible for leaving. The abuser is responsible not to abuse. It is not a marriage issue if it's partners or there's an intimate relationship. It is not women's issues. So we need to stop this. We need to tackle all this. Racism, everything. Like today we had Black History Month at work. And no, it shouldn't be just a month. It should be ingrained in our history, in our lives, like it deserves to, like it should. We have to stop this. We have to make this world inclusive. Make it easier for disabled people to work from home or to go on buses. And if we have that empathy, and if we make those changes that have compassion and empathy at the core of it, mental illness will decrease. So please fight for those changes. Those are the things we should be discussing, and those are the things that we should be aiming to change. Thank you for listening. My name is Antonella Zottola, and I wish you a good day.